So I will not pose that question again.
Which one?
The question of why Russia, why the enemy, why the demonization. I will instead put forward a hypothesis that I wouldn't feel comfortable putting forward otherwise because it is conjecturally based and not based on much fact, but some sort of connection of ideas, which is I wonder to what extent Putin got in the way of U.S. businesses that were having their way with the privatization of Russia. Did he kind of get in the middle of it? Did things get screwed up after 1998, after the collapse of the Russian economy? I mean, I still don't really understand it because I think, in my view, we know from the history of U.S. foreign policy, if an authoritarian dictator or whoever it is the worst person in the world, that is almost never important. What really matters is, do they do Washington's bidding? So clearly he, in some way or other, didn't do Washington's bidding. And I brings me back to my point, when and why did this relationship go south?
Well, it wasn't due to the American corporate business community. They were as eager as ever for the Russian market, which is a vast market. And, I think I may have the number wrong, but about 160 significant American corporations doing business and profitable business in post-Soviet Russia. And that's part of their balance sheet, and they don't want to lose it. So when Putin comes to power, he had to look pretty good to them. He was sober, as Christoph pointed out.
Sober Yeltsin.
He professed to be a capitalist. He professed to want business relations. And in fact, if you look at his, Putin is a fluent German speaker. He was stationed in Germany during his years in the KGB, and he has a special affinity for Germany. And I think I may have the number wrong, but something like 9,000 significant-sized German businesses do business in Russia. Stop and think about that. So here we ought to introduce something that is hard for us because we're provincial people, you and I. America's a provincial country. It's cut off. Putin thinks of himself as a European man. And he thinks of Russia.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it's important too. He thinks of himself as a European man. He lived in Europe. He speaks fluent German. It's unusual for a Russian political leader. The old Bolsheviks spoke foreign languages, but since then it's been unusual for a Kremlin leader to speak a foreign language. And by the way, his English seems to be pretty good. He's been studying English.
He stops the translator whenever he feels like
That's right. He knows.
You can tell that
he
knows what's going on.
And listen to him do his rendition of Fats Domino. He plays the piano and sings in English. His rendition of Fats Domino's on Blueberry Hill is a lark. But Putin thinks of himself as a European man. The interesting question I ask myself is, does he think of Russia as a European country? Because historically, we all know that Russia has straddled Europe and non-Europe to the east. Russia's been of Asia and been of Europe, both geographically, politically, intellectually, culturally, spiritually. And so Putin comes to power after an episode of please let us in the West, the Western, the Yeltsin thing with Clinton and all that, but during which Russia collapsed and men died at 57. We've talked about this. So here comes Putin, a European man,